how do we get paid? Where's the return? And what you realize is, well, there's 3 places I can get a return from. The most simple one is to say, I just want to take cost out of the IT budget. I want to take latency out of the IT experience. I just want to make it a better IT. So data centers, really? Every single company should have its own data center, kind of like we have our own power plant? But we don't, do we? Well, okay, so why aren't we using the cloud? I mean, it's like, why not, right? So desktops, yeah, if you were ever at your desk, they'd be really great. When was the last time you were at your desk, right? And so it's got to go mobile, right? And wireline, without wireline, we couldn't do anything, but let's put, wire, it's a little hard to carry that wire behind you as you're going through the world. So you just say, look, there's an opportunity here just to sort of modernize IT. I don't want to touch our operating model. I don't want to touch our business model. I just want to kind of get into the 21st century, okay? So score, okay, but that's a very clear state change. It says, don't disrupt people outside the IT organization. And by the way we're going to get paid is out of the IT budget. So the good news is that's a very clear budget. The bad news is it's about 2% of the total amount of money your company spends. So it's not a big win for the company, but it's certainly a good thing to do within IT. You go to the next level up, you say, no, hang on, much bigger idea here, guys. We want to change our operating model. We want to embrace these new technologies to have a different relationship with a consumer. You're certainly seeing that in media, you're seeing that in entertainment, you're seeing that in advertising, you're seeing that in retail, consumer packaged goods. We want to change our relationship there. They say in consumer there's an app for that, and in government there's a form for that. We'd like to move our forms to apps. It's a better, by the way, better data, but also better user experience. We've had a hierarchical organization all our lives. We've run things up and run things down, and we write memos and go through channels. We want to become more collaborative. That's a huge emphasis in the tech sector right now. When we have Aaron Levy up here from Box, Box is a core technology for going from hierarchical to collaborative. And we want to go from something, one size fits all to something more personalized. We want to change the operating model, and the return is not coming from the IT budget. The return is going to come from either more revenue or better margin, in either case because we are interacting with either our customers or our suppliers in a much more fluent, agile, flexible way. And as a result, we're taking waste out of the system, we're taking latency out of the system, and we're taking user dissatisfaction out of the system. And as a result, we intend to improve our operating margins by 1 or 2%. Well, 1 or 2% of an operating margin return is a heck of a lot bigger than what I'm going to get from just a pure IT budget saving play. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is, hang on, we think the world is actually on the wrong plan. We think we can re-engineer an entire industry. We think somebody standing on a corner waving their arms desperately for a cab in the rain in Manhattan is a bad idea. We think it would be very cool if they could just summon somebody to come to them with their smartphone, by the way, see where they are, by the way, get into the thing, the driver rates me, I rate them, and at the end, we just click and we're done. It's like, in other words, you're re-engineering an entire industry. Amazon Prime. Does anybody here subscribe to Amazon Prime? Why don't you just send your checkbook to Bezos and be done with it, right? I mean, he owns you. He owns you because he's re-engineered a business model, and you're going, wow. So what the press, of course, loves to do is talk about the top one of this thing, because that's the most exciting stories. They're very dramatic because we re-engineered a business model, which meant we had to invent an entirely new operating model, which means we had to invent an entirely new infrastructure model. So if you want to talk about the most dramatic stories, they start from the top. If you want to talk about the ones that I think are more middle of the pack, that's the middle. And by the way, you should not neglect just doing the bottom. And we'll explore all 3 of these rings on this model with our panel in just a second. So in terms of how you get the money back out, in a business model thing, you're going after, you're not going after the money trapped in a single company, you're going after the money trapped in an industry. It's like, whoa, that's a lot of money. So inefficient markets, unmet demand, inelastic overhead. Why should a consumer drive to a shopping mall so they can stand in line to wait to be checked out by somebody so they can then drive home when they could have said, in their pajamas, no, I'll just take the pink one, right? And so hugely inefficient markets, unmet demand, inelastic overhead, really interesting ideas. Airbnb is another one of these things. It's like, Who knew? Who knew that your bedroom was an asset, right? That kind of stuff, particularly when your kid moves out, which, by the way, is a very special day. Okay. Okay, in business operations, it's much more around where are we trapping value by virtue of the fact. What happens in business operations is we don't set out to trap value. We actually set out to design something pretty cool. But 10 years later, it's trapped value, because 10 years later, the technology now has 10x and then 100x. You talk about Moore's law and how the technology moves forward. Well, at some point you go, you know what, we're just doing things wrong with this new technology. And so we have this trap value. Our processes are inflexible. Our decision cycles are taking too long. Our marketing campaigns are uninformed. We put an ad out there. We have no idea who saw it or what they did with it. And now in this new world, it's like, well, why not? They clicked on it, didn't they? There's a log of the click stream, isn't there? There are computers that can analyze that log. Why the heck don't we know? And the answer is, well, because we're not there yet. I mean, it requires talent, it requires systems, but the truth is, it's there to be done. It's there to be done. And then from the infrastructure model, it's just just think about it. All the non-value added complexity, the dedicated resources on standby, the limits imposed by legacy system. This is just, look, we spent the 90s instrumenting the world with ERP and the internet and database systems. It was an amazing accomplishment. Those things are heavy. Those things do not change easily. And as the world shifts, it's like, okay, I'm going to change this. Okay, you got your report. That's it. That's for the year, right? Okay. But that's kind of the way it is, right? So that's where the value gets trapped. So you look at that and you say, okay, I get it. We've got a lot of returns here. Now, what about the elasticity of my organization? And that gets to this work that I've spent my life around called the technology adoption life cycle. And basically, this model had a pretty clear view of things. It said, if you introduce disruptive technology into any organization, it will self-segregate into 5 different responses. The people on the left are the people that are attracted to the technology, and the people on the right are the ones that are repelled by the technology, and the people in the middle are kind of, well, let's see how things play out. And the interesting thing about this model, and it plays out in every society, in every nation, in every company, in every ecosystem, is the first 2 responses, the technology enthusiasts and the early adopters, they kind of secede. They want to go early. And they create something we call the early market, where the early adopters, the cool stuff, and they get written about, and you hear a lot about them, and it's very cool. And then there's this thing we call the chasm, because everybody else is going, I don't know if this is ready for prime time yet. Could we just take a second and see how this thing plays out before we do this? And it's kind of like a junior high dance problem. There's girls on one side of the gym, boys on the other side of the gym. I'm not going out there. You go out there. And so how do you get the dance started? It turns out what we learned is you get the dance started around very niche market specific use cases that have an enormous amount of trapped value in that industry, in that business process. And there's so much trapped value there, and it's become urgent, it's actually become painful, it's potentially lethal, and people go, well, hell, I'm worried about this technology, but I'm more worried about my job. Let's see what it can do. And so you get these use cases going, and the reason it was called a bowling alley is if you get one of them going, you can kind of refer it to some more use cases. And if you build up enough use cases, you get this phenomenon we call the tornado. And the tornado is just when everybody goes, oh, it is ready for prime time. Oh, BYOD. 7 years ago, it was a BlackBerry, that was it. If your YOD was a BlackBerry, you can come in, otherwise, no thank you, right? Today, it's like, wow, I guess everybody's got to go BYOD. It's like, that's the new rules. So that creates a tornado of demand, in which case you're just shipping up infrastructure and you just want to make sure you don't break anything during a tornado. And then you get to Main Street, and Main Street is when things are better, faster, and cheaper. Proven, the bugs, they actually don't, it's like you're typically on release 3.1 or beyond. It actually works, pretty much as the spec said it would work, unlike its predecessors, right? So you go, that was pretty cool. I'd like to wait till then. So what ended up happening was we realized from this model there are 4 times where it makes sense for you to say, okay, this is our time. And each one has got a different reward system. Excuse me. The first one is, we're going to go first. We know the paint is not even dry on this thing. We're going first. We see an opportunity with this technology to fundamentally change the world. It's typically associated with those business model opportunities. And we're going to do this with a project, because we know that there aren't any real products yet, and there's certainly no ecosystem yet. So we're going to pull together somebody like Capgemini, and we're going to pull together the technology leaders and some of our best people inside, and we are going to do this for the very first time on the planet. And we're kind of hoping nobody else does it for a while, because we think once we put this system in place, we are going to eviscerate our competition, and we're going to rearrange wealth on this earth. It's a very, very ambitious idea. Okay? It requires, it has to be CEO sponsored. I mean, it's just, this is a company bet, right? It's a big bet, okay? But then you say, okay, so you should ask yourself, could our company do that? Is that the way, is that us? Because, it's not many, for sure, right? Could that be us? The second one is, no, that isn't us. But you know what? We're also going early, not quite as early as the first guys, but we're going early because we have a severe problem. We have something that is really, really pinching our operating model typically. It hurts. In fact, we've had a disruptive person come into our industry. You're the taxi industry in San Francisco, who announced about a month ago 65% of their business is down over the past 2 years because of Uber and Lyft. Maybe they should get a mobile app. What do you think? Okay, now you're a taxi driver and you're going, well, I'm not a mobile guy. I know, you're going to be out of business, dude. Are you sure? Maybe you could get more mobile than you think. And so what you do there is, look, I don't need to have the rating system. I don't need to rate my passengers. My passengers don't need to rate me. Hell, I don't even actually have to do payment through this thing, but they have to be able to summon me and they have to be able to see where I am. Okay? So what you're doing now is you're fixing a very specific problem for a very specific return. Your company is galvanized because you've created a crisis. And the company actually doesn't rally around digital. The company rallies around the crisis. And then digital is the answer to that crisis, and that's how you position it. The third one is, no, we're not in crisis. So then the idea is, but you know what? This stuff is really productive. This wireless thing, I think it's here to stay. This internet, I'm pretty sure it's here to stay. So let's get on the program. Let's roll out the infrastructure. Let's enjoy, the 21st century world. We can get better things done more easily. We're not trying to change the world. We're not trying to revolutionize the company. This is evolution, not revolution. But it is evolution. I mean, this is a Darwinian world. You are supposed to move forward or lose your place in line. So that's what we want to do. And by the way, we'd like to do it with whoever is the winners in the market. It's interesting, with a market leader, if you're a customer, the only thing worse than buying from a market leader is not buying from a market leader, okay? Because the market forms around the market leader, the ecosystem forms around the market leader, all the standards form around the market leader, and so the pragmatic person goes, you know what, get the market leader and just get over it, right? Just move on. And then the fourth one is, no, you know what, I hate this stuff. By the way, our industry is undigital. If people have 10 fingers in our industry, they're considered an anomaly. We chop things, we're heavy-duty people, right? But eventually you get to the point of, okay, but honest to God, really, it's called a phone. Try it. I mean, this fax thing, it really is last century. You can actually send a fax without having to scan a piece of paper into your thing, whatever. You can do these things better. And so you say, great, if I can get evolutionary extensions from established vendors, and by the way, the people on Main Street in general say, look, all kidding aside, we're just not a technology company. We're a real company. We do really well. We're not about digital. That's not who we are, okay? So yeah, I know I need this stuff. Kind of make it go away. Just make it okay, okay? So 4 ideas. By the way, we have that poll thing. Can we try that right now? What I'd love to do is just to say, at the margin, if you have think about the digital initiative that you are most intrigued by right now. The one that if you said, well, if we're going to do something big in digital in my company in the next year, I got something in mind. And then ask yourself, which of these 4 would you predict would represent your company's posture toward this disruptive idea? Would your company be the one that wants to buy ahead of the curve for competitive advantage? Would it be the one that wants to buy ahead of the curve because there's an urgent use case in your company and your industry that you're very concerned about right now? Would you like to buy kind of when everybody else is buying? New infrastructure, better productivity? Or would you just as soon wait until all the smoke and dust had settled and get a great product for a good price. So to me, all four of these are totally legit. So maybe we could just get, how are we doing? We could run it up. Oh. Yes, this is not a piece of paper. It says polls. Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you know what? That's pretty close to the actual bell curve, right? It's pretty close, okay? Amazing that thing, those bell curves. I think at the Seattle World's Fair, there's this huge pachinko machine where they would drop like 10,000 ping pong balls or something, and every time it came into a bell curve. And you would watch it every time and you think, yep, they did it again. Statistics works. So all right, so the point about this exercise is there is not, in my view, I think Silicon Valley in general says the higher you are on this chart, the more intelligent you are, and frankly, the more you have a right to be, okay? I mean, this is like the Big Bang Theory writ large in the Bay Area. And Sheldon's in charge of everything. So the point is, it's just not true. It's just not true. And so what's important is that you do horses for courses. And we have some folks here who are going to take horses out for courses later today. That's the thing you want to do. So because the most irresponsible thing you can do is put the wrong project into the wrong situation. All you're doing is creating a lose-lose. Okay, let's go back to the presentation, if you would. Just have a couple. So that footnote at the bottom, no right answers. So let me just kind of close this chalk talk by saying, okay, one of the ways you can think about how ambitious you want to be, we call it a stairway to heaven model. Minor apologies to Led Zeppelin, but the idea is how disruptive and where are we? So I just kind of said, look, here are 4 mega trends, and I think this is my view of them. I think that cloud, software as a service, I think that's at the Main Street level. I think right now that if you were to go to your board of directors and say, I want to build another data center, you might have to have another meeting, right? I mean, it's like, guys, are you sure, really? Yeah, I know security is still not perfect, but by the way, ours isn't perfect either. I mean, so I think it's on Main Street. I think mobile is pretty much now in the tornado. I think if you go to your customer base, if you go to your supplier base, or you go to your employee base and say, we don't support mobile devices, we don't do this wireless stuff, you have to go to a web portal from your desktop, that just feels pretty dangerous. Feels like, no, come on, guys, get over it, move on. Social is an interesting one. You know, social, particularly for the demographic in this room, it seems just weird. At least it does to me. But social has an interesting implication for our industries, and that's around this notion of communities. So this motion from hierarchical to collaborative, and I'm going to talk to Aaron a little bit about it later today, includes letting your customers help each other work through their issues with the technology and the products that you deliver. It turns out customers know your products better than your customer support organization. They have more time to spend with other customers than you do, and the other customers trust them more than they trust you. Other than that, you're fine, right? So the point is, why wouldn't you? But you know what? Not every industry has a business community, and not every industry needs this. But where it does work, I mean, like in tech, there's no major high-tech company that doesn't have a tech support community capability. You're crazy not to. And by the way, you're not allowed to pay them. It's like, whoa, okay, well, that'll affect my OpEx. So it's a very, very cool investment, but again, it's targeted. And then I would submit to you that analytics right now is the single most volatile substance on the planet. Because the companies that are eviscerating industries right now, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Googles, whatnot, they all have massive machine learning capabilities, way more than your company's going to get. And it's a little bit like showing up to a gunfight with a Bowie knife. I mean, we've got to figure out how to do it, but there's some time. But there's not like by the end of this decade, you cannot just have a Bowie knife. You got to figure out some way to get analytics. And I thought Didier and George were incredibly articulate last night about the talent challenge, the talent gaps, the leadership gaps, as well as the technology gaps. That's a big ask right now. Now, hopefully our universities and our things will get better at it, but it's a big ask right now. So the point about that exercise is just, again, how ambitious do we want to be? And frankly, you can fall in love with analytics and the CEO can read the article in the Airplane magazine, but if you can't run cloud, you need not apply to the analytics class, right? So there's a sense in which the staircase is a way of earning your way up the ladder a bit. It isn't completely linear. As DDA said last night, nothing in life is actually linear, except in PowerPoint, which is why I deal mostly in PowerPoint. I'm a linear thinker. But at least it gives you a place to start the conversation. So just to kick these things off, cloud, just look at the benefits there. Pay by the drink, outsource CapEx and maintenance, eliminate error-inducing variability. In the cloud, there's only one instance. So the problem with being a software vendor is every one of your customers installs your product. Immediately, it's changed by the environment. So you have this incredibly hard support problem. The open heart surgery, you install this stuff, oh God, I don't want to install the next release. The only thing you know about if you installed release 7 is you will never in your life install release 8. Right? Because why would you just what do I want to have subscribe to open heart surgery? So kind of consume it by the drink. So you go, okay, I'm not going to do that. You get the innovation you pay for. There's nothing more frustrating in life than paying a licensed software vendor maintenance specifically not to use the next release, right? It just feels crappy, right? And future-proof your architecture. So you look at it and you think, that's a tough, I wouldn't want to have to debate the other side of the pro and con here. Let's just put it that way. So that's why I think it's on Main Street. Salesforce, Workday, NetSuite, Intact, Concur. And by the way, if you have a legacy ERP world, it's not here yet, and it may not be here for a decade, but this is still a very tough value proposition to compete against. Mobile, this is kind of more tornado. Be productive anywhere, anytime. We've been saying that for 25 years. It's actually true. It's actually true. You guys can ignore me during this time. You can get your email done. You're being productive right here in Pebble Beach. Okay? You can stay in touch with fast-breaking developments. You can respond to requests in real time. That means, for example, I've got a hot recruit. I've got the rec. I need you to approve the hire. There's a competitive offer. Oh, you're in Afghanistan? No problem, right? Check. Okay, so that kind of stuff. Extend collaborative workflows, let customers and partners access you 24/7. That's considered a benefit. You have to think about that last bullet because that's a little. But I would Apple, Box, Chatter, Link, Web. This stuff is everywhere. It's like, okay, this is the time. Okay, if we're not doing this, we're probably getting behind. Okay. The next one is business communities. Dramatically improves customer support, it enables ad hoc collaboration, detects issues and concerns. Yeah, business communities, by the way, are incredible focus groups because they're just petri dishes for the problems that are percolating in your world. And they also, by the way, give great insights into how to solve them. This ecosystem relationship thing, as we move to a more specialist economy, you can't do anything without an ecosystem. This is what makes market leaders so important. Because market leaders, ecosystems self-organize around anchor tenants, big market leaders, and the ecosystem is the new, you actually compete in tech now based on your own company, your own products, but also the throw weight of your ecosystem. And that's why ecosystem, and as a vendor or as a customer, you have to think about, I'm not just buying a product from a vendor, I'm now joining into an ecosystem. Is this the ecosystem I want to be part of? You have to look at that now. Engage and enlist your strongest supporters, incorporate feedback early in the development cycle. Where this matters, it matters a ton. Mostly in technical, high tech right now, but also, for example, increasingly now in consumer goods, people negotiating brand relationships, some of the same stuff. And then the analytics. This ability to detect trends via the digital footprints that the world leaves behind itself every time it clicks anywhere on a screen. It turns out, we saw the NSA doing this maybe a little bit aggressively with our friends in Germany. We saw anti-terrorists do this. This has been going on for 15 or 20 years as a highly specialized, a bowling alley thing. It's now available. It still raises a lot of questions. There's privacy issues. There's tons of issues. But predictive maintenance, fault detection, yield optimization, task automation, consumer personalization, these are very powerful ideas. And when General Electric says, we want to shift our business model from selling you an aircraft engine to selling you flight miles, This is what's going to allow them to do it. This is how they're able to transform their business model from giving you a product to essentially selling you a service. Hard to imagine an airplane engine as a service, but guess what? MRI machine as a service? Yep, just put your credit card in there. Okay. All right, so we look at these things, and just to close on this, we had this business model here thing, and I think basically the way you map the two models to each other is, in general, the infrastructure model play is best suited to the bottom of the staircase. The operating model is best suited to the middle of the staircase. And the business model one is, in my view, suited only to the top of the staircase. Primarily to startups, I think. It's very hard to ask an incumbent to do self-surgery. But when the disruptor does something up here, the classic response is the incumbent has to do something to their operating model. The most common thing you're going to be asked to do this decade is, some disruptor came into our industry and is changing the rules of the industry. We cannot do what they do. We have to change our operating model to neutralize their business model. And that phrase, I think, is the key phrase. We have to change our operating model to neutralize their business. We can't change our business model. We've been in this business for 50 years. But we can change our operating model in ways that neutralize their business model. That's what a mobile app would do for the taxi business in San Francisco. It wouldn't make them Uber, but it would go a long way to neutralizing the competitive advantage of your folks. So that's the idea here. So last slide, and I'm going to bring up our panel. 3 questions to ask about the next big thing. In other words, if you're using these frameworks in your organization, you say, okay, question number 1, where is this thing in the technology adoption lifecycle? Is it early? Is it middle? Is it late? Who's done this already is a great question to ask. Which adoption stage best captures its current state? By the way, you don't personally have to have the right answer. You can socialize the model with your constituents and let the community buy into it. But what you can't let them do is let the community say, well, I think it's on Main Street and I think it's in the early market. You have to say, until we converge on one of these 4 states, we're not doing anything in our company. Because each one of those states implies that we're going to try to make a state change. Every one of those steps in that staircase says, we have a current state that we are not satisfied with, we have a future state that we want to achieve. There's a return on investment associated with this future state, either from infrastructure spend reduction, operating model improvement, or business model disruption. Which of the 3 are we doing? We're only doing one. Pick one. So if it's infrastructure, it's infrastructure only. If it's operating model, it's operating model and infrastructure. If it's a business model, it's business model and operating model and infrastructure. But what are we trying to do? Which game are we playing? And how big a jump are we taking? Are we kidding ourselves? The fashionista that we talked about last night is somebody who ignores this question, who just jumps to the top of the escalator because the pretty toys are up there. And it's like, no, that's not the right thing to do. And then what kind of a return is it most important for us to gain? Competitive differentiation through digital technology is largely achieved through business model disruption, partially through operating model, not at all. If you just did the infrastructure model, that does not create competitive differentiation. Competitive differentiation, I think, is more suited to the early market. You actually want to create a chasm if you're going to competitively differentiate. You actually don't want people to follow you. You don't want to be with the herd. So think about what you're asking your company to do. Operating productivity, to me, is the gift that just keeps on giving. Every year, there's just money there, trapped value in your operating models to release. So I think the bulk of the interest of the high return successful IT investments come from there. And then infrastructure and efficiency. When you're in an inefficient infrastructure, it's a nightmare. It's just a nightmare. And just getting that cleaned up is a big accomplishment.